All right. Hi. How are
Hi.
you?
Good to see ya.
Good to see you. So I saw you Instagram takeover. That was really amazing.
Aw, thanks. The kids are
Really,
pretty cute.
yeah, I really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed that. You look great, by the way.
Thank you. So do you. I love your little mini Christmas tree back there.
Oh, yeah, I just ordered a little elf right there. So if you can
Aw,
see it, it's right there standing
that's
there.
so cute. Yeah.
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 All right. So we're going to ask you 4 questions today. Um, are you ready?
Yeah. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Okay, the first one. Um, what is your first musical experience?
Well, I think my first musical experience is from like before I can remember. So my parents are pretty musical. I'm from a pretty musical family. They both play instruments. And they say, of course, I don't know, that I was singing from the time I was like a baby. Like I learned to talk and then I was like singing songs about like mama, papa, which is like mom and dad in Chinese. Um, Other than that, I started out in church choir from the time I was pretty little. And actually, funny story, the church choir at my church, the children's choir at my church was mandatory for the kids. I think because they figured if they didn't make it mandatory, like not enough kids would join. But I remember loving that. And then I started out doing choir in school and things like that as I got a little older. So yeah.
Oh, that's so great. So were you guys exploring like all different languages repertoire or just English repertoire?
In church, gosh, I think we probably sang English, and churches like to do things in Swahili. I don't know exactly why. We probably sang some in Chinese. I think it was probably when we were little, it was mostly English, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, you are an opera singer now that you have to sing all different languages, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell us a little more. What kind of language? What different languages you have to do?
Yeah, so for opera, the most useful ones are Italian, German, and French. And then after that, probably Russian. I've actually never sung anything in Russian, but some people do, and Czech. Um, but those are kind of the main ones, the Italian, French, and German. A lot of the first operas are written in those languages, and some of the most famous ones. But there are also a lot of languages, or sorry, operas written in English. Britain, Brit, Copeland, what are some other Handel, a lot of composers who wrote in English, and of course more modern composers as well. And then there are languages that are used in opera that just might not be as common. Like there's Chinese operas, and there are lots of other operas in other languages. They're just not as frequently done.
Yeah, most of people didn't know that opera singer actually required to sing in, gosh, like as many as languages you can, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, so we're gonna move on to second question, okay?
Mhm.
Um, so why voice, and how did you get into opera?
Yeah, so I have always liked singing. I did not like opera as a kid. I remember my parents would like play recordings. I would be like, I hate it. And I think part of it was like, as kids, sometimes like our musical taste is just different from what it'll be as an adult. Um, but I knew that I liked singing, and so I kind of fell into opera sort of by accident. I was in choir and then I was in musical theater, and I knew I loved musical theater. I started doing that mostly in high school, a little bit in middle school. And then in college, I started taking voice lessons for real, like seriously. Um, and I had a teacher who kind of encouraged me toward the opera route, and she was like, "I think you're pretty good at this. Like maybe think about pursuing it." She wasn't pressuring me, but she was encouraging me. And she showed me some opera singers that whose voices were kind of similar to mine, who I kind of identified with. And so I think that was really what worked in the end for me. I was like, oh, okay, opera isn't like this one sound that I was associating it with from childhood. Of course, as I got older, I think I also grew to appreciate like bigger voices and like, more vibrato and like a richer tone, all that stuff. But as a young singer, I think what really helped me get into it was hearing singers that I was like, oh, okay, this is like opera has many different forms, and like these singers actually kind of sound like me. Like maybe I could sound like that, right? So that was kind of how I got inspired by my voice teacher in college.
Well, tell us like what kind of voice you are.
Yeah, so I am what most people would call a coloratura soprano, or some people have said light lyric. The sopranos, okay, so there are 5 main voice types. Soprano is the highest female voice type, then mezzo soprano, and then for men, generally, it's tenor, baritone, bass. Um, Most common being baritone, and that's like kind of the medium low voice, and then less common are bass, which is the very low voice, and tenor, which is the higher voice. There's also countertenor, which is right in the middle, and contralto, which is like the lowest female voice. Countertenor is the highest male voice. Um, anyway, but the main ones are soprano, mezzo soprano, tenor, bass. Um, and so I'm a soprano, so I'm a high voice. And within soprano, in opera specifically, there are lots of little designations based on just how your voice sounds and where you're comfortable singing in terms of really, really high or kind of medium high, or just like kind of where your voice is happiest, is how we like to talk about it. Um, yeah, so my voice has always been pretty happy singing like super, super high notes. A little bit less so as I've gotten older, I will say. But like now I have to like actually think about my technique. Now when I was really young, I was like, whatever. But yeah, so my voice is it tends to move okay, and it sits high. The tessitura is high. That's where my voice is comfortable. So
All
yeah.
right. Well, that's a really great explanation. So
Hopefully it
hopefully,
wasn't confusing.
oh no, no, no. So you were probably the what, the queen of night in training, or were it
No, I've
potentially?
tried it. Yeah, it's like that's like a long-term vision. Is like maybe Queen of the Night type stuff. I've done like Daughter of the Regiment type stuff. Let's see, what else have I worked on? I've worked a little bit on Lucia, but my voice is probably happier doing things like Adina. Um, what else is coloratura specific? I've sung like Fiacre Millie's aria, which is a little bit less well known. One of my favorites is Madame Mao's aria from Nixon in China. That's a fun
Yeah, I
one.
remember at the Princeton Festival.
Yeah.
Were you the one singing that?
No, I wasn't. I wish I could have seen that. I heard that was a really cool production.
Yes. All right. Well, good luck. Hope like one day, all this dream roles
Thanks.
will come true. All right. So we're gonna move on to third question. Tell us a little about you recently see, hear, and read.
Yeah, so recently I watched The Crown. That was probably my most recent TV show that I really, really liked that I saw. Um, Sad, of course, but always beautifully filmed, and it's very well done. Um, I heard, well, I kind of saw and heard Julia Bullock's um, Tiny Desk recital. So she is an opera singer who lives in Germany with her husband, who is a pianist, and so they put in an entry for the Tiny Desk concert, which is always kind of a little intimate concert done in like a small space kind of thing with a small number of performers. And so in this case, they're doing it virtually, and she and her husband just filmed it in their apartment in Germany. So it was a lovely little set with, I think she did like a couple of spirituals and um, songs by American composers and songs by German composers as well. She did a Kurt Weill piece. So that was really lovely. Read. I read the last thing I read was a book called Water for Elephants, and so it's a book that was made into a movie a few years ago. Maybe I'll see the movie now. I've never seen it, but it's about a guy who actually works in a circus, so it's a pretty interesting, like drama, love triangle kind of story.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay, so we're gonna go to our last question. Okay, so what is like to be Asian American in music industry in United States right now? Uh,
Yeah.
especially
Well,
we're in a pandemic, right? Like,
yeah.
what tell us a little more.
Yeah, so I would say that my thoughts on this have kind of evolved over the years. Um, I would say that as a young singer, I thought a lot about Asian representation on stage, just being on stage as an Asian singer and an Asian American singer specifically. Um, and that's something that I've continued to think about a little bit as I've kept working. Particularly, I've done a lot of work in education and outreach with opera companies. I've done that with Portland Opera and Seattle Opera, and so just for little kids to get to see like someone who looks like them on stage, I think is really cool and really necessary. Um, I Yeah, I think I have a little bit less of a chip on my shoulder now about representation in the sense of like, I don't think people like me are on stage because as I've gotten older, I've seen more and more, like as the years have gone on, I've seen more and more really excellent Asian and Asian American singers on big stages, and they're doing awesome work. So I feel a little less like worried about that than I used to. It's great to see that happening. But now I think my focus is more maybe on like how Asian stories are being told. Um, so like the thing that comes to mind first is last year I was able to, ooh, maybe it was 2 years ago. This year has been a blur, right? I saw a production of Madama Butterfly at Portland Opera, and it was done with racially appropriate casting. So Madama Butterfly is a story about an American naval officer and a young Japanese teenager, and they fall in love, but the girl really falls in love with the man. He ends up leaving her, going back to America. It's kind of a sad story. They are reunited at the end, but I won't spoil it. But it is a sad ending. Um, but anyway, so the opera that I saw was racially appropriately cast. So the Pinkerton, the naval officer, was a white man, and then the major Asian characters in the story, the Japanese characters, were cast with Asian actors, Asian singers. And it was really powerful to see the story done that way. It's a very popular opera. It's beautiful music. It's by Puccini, and yeah, I mean, opera companies sometimes do it not with racially appropriate casting. I would say often, they will just choose the person with the best voice to do the role, and those are often beautiful. Like they sound great, and those are all great actors and actresses. But it doesn't hit you in the same way because it's you kind of have to like suspend disbelief, and it doesn't quite tell the same story. Like just being able to see on stage an Asian woman in a relationship with this white man, and then like all the people around her, like her like townspeople, her family, being Asian, and like like the relationships there. It was really powerful, and I think like particularly, this is a little personal, but for me, like I'm an Asian woman, I'm dating a white man, so I was like, this is personal. Like not that this story is happening to me, thank goodness, right? But like those dynamics still exist, right? And it's um really interesting to be able to see that on stage, and also because you can physically see it, to make connections in like our own lives and like what is actually still happening in the world today in like a more real way. So
Yeah, so my hope is that through music education that we can all sort of explore our identity just through music,
yeah.
right? That's why we're doing music education, so that those young children through music can uh, just know more of like their culture, their background, and their own
Yeah.
identity. So hopefully that's something we can, as a musician, both of us, we can now like, I won't say fight through it, but like the common goal to walk
Yeah.
through, right? To walk um, with all the young audience and the young kids, right?
Yeah, and I think opera specifically because, it's a storytelling medium for kids to be able to understand more because they're seeing stories that are specifically, are cast specifically and tell a specific story that they can relate to, I think is really powerful and really important.
Yeah, all right. It's so good to talk to you today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all this 4 different questions, and amazing job for the recital for the concert. And thank you again for the Instagram takeover. And then we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Ivy.